January the 3rd, and payday is gone. So we're at day number 3.
Sorry.
And
Dis-
yep,
I
jy
have,
steel my vier jou. Good morning. It is a Monday morning. It's January the 3rd, and payday has come and gone. So I trust you smiling on this Monday morning as you join us on the Fifth Connection for the next exciting episode in the text of the Christian scriptures that talks about stick-to-itiveness. The need for sticking with what God is doing and God is unfolding. Oh, that we would develop a stickiness. And so this morning I'm going to talk you through a slice of the story as it comes up in chapter 4 of the book of Hebrews, going from verse number 1 to verse number 11. Ever so often we encourage each other to take a break. A teacher would tell a group of learners, for instance, to take a brain break. Just relax, sit back, kick out your legs, take a break, and breathe deeply. Because often we have a rest deficit. We go and go and go, and we just keep going. And we think like we are Duracell bunnies. But even Duracell bunnies run down. Those Duracell batteries do run out. So physical rest is important. So is mental rest, mental breaks. But on top of that, you have emotional rest. Because you and I can only take so much of a beating. And life does that to us, doesn't it? Or we allow life to do that. So we need to take breaks where we do something creative and different. Social rest is another important aspect. To spend time with people who don't have anything, they don't need anything from us. So is sensory rest. Just switch off your phone. Switch it off. Or some of us will die if it gets switched off. Have you ever watched a gal or a girl lose their phone and watch how they go into a state of panic? Well, in many ways, our lives have become dependent on those little gadgets, and we need those sensory breaks, don't we? The scriptures here is going to talk about spiritual rest, that deep need that we have for deep connection and a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, and a sense of acceptance. The writer is going to talk about the importance of experiencing this rest. And so the question behind this part of the story is, what is the cure for restlessness? Maybe you're not sleeping at night. You can't go to sleep just with a clear mind and drop off. My wife envies me every single night. I put my head down and I'm gone. To which I respond, well, I confess before I go and sleep at night. The implication being that you better start confessing. But we have fun with it. Well, she doesn't have as much fun as I do. But it is important to experience God's rest in our lives. We have a place in the sun, which is secured by our oath of allegiance to the cross. We have pledged our allegiance to Christ. We have trusted Him as Lord and Savior of our lives because Messiah, King Jesus, Messiah, is King. And so we have a secure place in the sun, which has been secured by faith, reliance on Him. So what permits us to rest in the sun? Well, the writer goes on to talk us through two ideas in the text of the story that provides us with rest. The first 6 verses of the paragraph is going to talk about the fact that Rest is impossible without faith. Without faith, rest is impossible because we will constantly have this longing that we aren't doing enough, we aren't being enough, we aren't saying enough, we just ain't good enough. Resting in the Lord is impossible without a God confidence in our lives, a confidence in God that He can be trusted. He's trustworthy. Well, look at what the text says here in chapter 4 and starting in verse number 1. Therefore, while the promise of entering His rest, that's God's rest, while it still stands, let us fear, lest any of you should seem to have failed to reach it. These believers were standing in danger of defecting. They were Christian Hebrews. And the danger that they were running was as persecution was crashing in on their lives. They thought that if they were to defect back into Judaism, the pressure would go away. And the writer is now encouraging him. The promise of entering God's rest still stands. Let us fear lest any of you should seem to have failed to reach it. For good news came to us just as to them. Who's them? These Old Testament believers, the Old Testament crowd, Israel, the people of God. But the message they heard did not benefit them because they were not united by faith with those who listened. So rest is possible, but it comes by faith. It comes by an embodied reliance upon God. We often talk about our thinking brain and our body brain, our mind brain and our body brain. Well, faith is something that is embodied. It's not just all in your head. Your total being is involved in embracing this reliance upon God. The mind brain is a lot quicker and faster. And the body brain, of course, takes a while to come along. It's like a truck and trailer. A truck and trailer can turn, but it takes time for a truck and trailer to turn. It cannot turn on a penny. Or as we would say in this part of the world, a tikkie. Right? I have a small car which has got a short wheelbase. And that wheelbase allows this car to turn very, very sharply. And within a small area as well. But a truck and trailer cannot do that. It takes a while to turn. And we need to constantly be in the wisdom gym, the wisdom gymnasium, where we are being taught what reliance upon God is all about. The good news came to these believers. It came to us just as it did them. But the message they heard did not benefit them because it was not combined with faith. And so what we hear, we need to put our full confidence in. We need to trust it. In the West, we have a great problem because we think that if we purely believe sentence propositions of belief, then we are fine. Well, it has a lot more to do with that. It has very little to do with that, as important as what propositions are. Because propositional statements is the currency of dispositional knowing. How do I come to know things? By getting involved in the process of life and living. By activating these biblical principles in my life. It's not good enough just to have them in my head. And that's where they stay. But to live it. To have it become part of my being. We are very enamored in Western Christianity with what people know. And especially with our gurus, our theological gurus. We all seem to have them, right? We just don't say who they are. But we have our gurus, our go-to guys that we think are great guys because they tell us what to believe. Well, it's more than just knowing what to believe. It is living in line with what those propositions empower us to do. Because those propositions are signifiers. They point to something. As when my finger points to the sun, my finger is not the sun, but it's the signifier pointing to the sun. Sometimes we get quite confused. We think that if we know loads and loads of doctrinal statements and presuppositions of the faith that we find. Well, verse 3 in this text says, for we believers, these were the Christian Hebrews, who have believed, enter that rest. As God has said, and here's a quote from the Old Testament, as I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest, although his works were finished from the foundation of the world. So God has done all that is needed in order for me to experience his rest. Do I rely on him to experience his rest in my life? Or am I on the treadmill of performance, trying to perform and outperform my neighbor, my Christian neighbor, because I have this idea that God is very impressed with my performance? Well, the text goes on to say, for he has somewhere spoken of the seventh day in this way. What's the seventh day? The Sabbath. And God rested on the seventh day from all his work. That goes back to creation. And again in this passage he said, they shall not enter my rest, because Israel was disobedient. And as a result was not able to enter into God's rest, which was the promised land. Verse 6. Rest is impossible without faith. But verse 6 says, rest is real. Pursue it. Chase after it. Go after it. Experience it. Since therefore it remains for some to enter it, and those who formerly received the good news failed to enter because of disobedience. What was their disobedience? Hardness of heart in the very next verse. If you go back into the text of chapter 3, it is the sin of unbelief. The sin of hardening your heart. Unbelief. Not trusting him, that what he says is trustworthy. And so here you see in verse number 6 and verse number 7, they received the good news, but they failed to enter into God's rest because of disobedience. And then in verse 7, another quotation. Today, saying through David, so long afterwards in the words already quoted, today if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts, because if you harden your heart, you will forfeit the blessings of the promises of God. The blessing for Israel was a land. It was descendants, and it was blessings. The same thing God promised to Abraham, a land, descendants, and blessing. For in verse 8, for if Joshua had given them rest, God would not have spoken of another day later on. So then, there remains a sabbatismos, a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For whoever has entered God's rest has also rested from his work as God did from his. So to enjoy the blessings of God has to do with resting in the Lord. It's a calm confidence that you and I can exude, that we can express as we live life calmly in the center of where God has us. It is interesting that Jesus calms the storm when the disciples are on the Sea of Galilee. He calms the storm, and as a result, the disciples' hearts are calmed. But I want to tell you what the scriptures promises here is that in the midst of the storm of your life, in the midst of the persecution which these believers were suffering, I can experience calmness of heart when I pursue his rest. It's a restful encounter with God that he has done it all. I need to calm. I need to chill, to calm and rely upon Him and move in a God confidence that only He can give me. Verse 11. Let us therefore strive to enter that rest, so that no one may fall by the same sort of disobedience. What disobedience is in view? A hardening of the heart. How does hardening of heart happen? It happens with slippage in my life. I start not to trust Him, and I continue not to trust Him, and I slip further and further away. And so how far does it take to fall away from God? I want to tell you this morning, it doesn't take a lot to fall, because you don't fall very far. Slippage starts very subtly and slowly in our lives, the way darkness creeps in on us when the sun sets. Slowly but surely that sun drops below the horizon and the darkness falls. Strive to enter His rest. How do you get into His rest? By being calmly confident that He can be trusted, so that no one may fall away because of a hardness of heart. Where are you postured this morning in terms of trusting God? Do you have a calm confidence in Him, or are you flapping all over the place all the time? If we rest in His work, then our residence in the future is in the new Eden, the heaven coming down to earth. But in the meantime, I can experience a glimpse of that heaven in my soul as I rest with calm confidence in Him that He can take me through the challenges that I face on this Monday morning. Back to you, Theo.
Yeah, not just on Monday mornings, right? So sort of every day of the week. What a challenge. It's not easy to be calm.
Whew. Yep.
Great
challenge.
It's not impossible to be calm either. And it's quite daunting to be calm if everything and everyone around you is flipping out or distraught by the things of life that strangles their souls, our souls. This is a busyness and a hectic schedules that people face every single day, and I'm sure Mondays after a weekend of rest sort of brings us back to a reality that causes us to take your challenge this morning with a pinch of salt. People
very much so.
Yeah, if folks are like me, we think the realities around us pushes us to sometimes doubt this, but we need to hear more of this. We need to hear more of the importance of what it is to be calm. And I think what I hear this morning is this is not just another talk show on how to be calm and influence friends and all of that kind of nice, good, motivational things. But this kind of rest and this calmness that floods or comes over our souls is so rooted in who we think God is, number one, and who we think, what worth we think He has to be trusted. And so that encouragement this morning is deeply appreciated. And Terry's chosen a song called Jesus, I Am Resting in Jesus. I'm resting. That's the title. Wow. Terry, thank you so very much, brother, for this morning.
Thank you, Theo. Thank you, listeners.
Rattling us and bringing us salt. We appreciate that. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Rest in Him. Be calm, and be calm for the right reason.
Jesus, I am Thou hast bid me gaze upon thee, and thy beauty fills my soul. For by thy transforming power thou hast made me whole. Jesus, I am resting in the joy of what thou art. I am finding out the greatness of thy loving heart.
Oh, how great thy loving kindness, vaster, broader than the sea. Oh, how marvelous thy goodness, lavished all on me. Yes, I rest in thee, beloved. Know what wealth of grace is thine. Know thy certainty of promise, and have made it mine.
Simply trusting thee, Lord Jesus, I behold thee as thou art, and thy love so pure, so changeless, satisfies my heart, satisfies its deepest longings, meets, supplies its every need, and surrounds me with its blessings. Thine is love indeed. Jesus, I am